Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It is my great honor and personal privilege to introduce our keynote luncheon speaker, Mr. Masataka Okano. My connection with Mr. Okano dates back more than 25 years to 1999, when he was serving in the Russian division of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We first met when I was asked to conduct research in Russian archives regarding the 1956 Japan-Soviet Declaration. In short, he is one who inspired me to research Northern Territory disputes issue. Our paths crossed again in Washington, D.C. in 2007 after I got the reward award from Asahi Shimbun for my book proposal, 50-50 Spirit Solution on the Northern Territory disputes. At the time, he was serving as a counselor at the Embassy of Japan, and I was a visiting fellow at the Brookings Institution where he provided me with tremendous support. In December 2009, he was the director of International Legal Affairs Division. We invited deliver a lecture at the very first symposium Hokkaido University Global COE project on the border studies here, this room. He even graciously contributed an article on the basis of the lecture to our journal, Eurasia Border Review. It's a first issue. His title is that, How to Deal with Border Issues, a Diplomat Practitioner's Perspective. So many practitioners quote this Okano-san's article. Even now, this is the first issue, only one example I had. I can't give you, but you can download on the web, even now free. Later, during his tenure as director of Russian division, we kept in close touch regarding the Northern Territory issues. Particularly shocking news was that in 2010 November, President Medvedev visited Kunashiri Island ever first in the history. So we are seriously face the challenge of Russia against us in some place. So, and when he returned to Washington as a minister at embassy, I once again relied heavily on his generous support for events I organized in the United States, including the Brookings and some think tanks. I had strongly hoped to invite him back to the Slavic-Eurasian Research Center here when he became the Director General of International Legal Affairs Bureau. But unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic made them impossible. Since then, his career has advanced with breathtaking speed. He quickly rose the very highest echelon of government, truly becoming someone above the crowds. From my perspective, serving as the Director General of Foreign Policy Bureau, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, and subsequently joining the National Security Secretariat. Given his incredible demanding responsibilities, I'm deeply moved and thrilled that fate had allowed us to welcome him back here today. So this is my final symposium here at the SRC. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming a distinguished diplomat and dear old colleague, Mr. Okano.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. I'm very happy to be here. This is a center focusing on regional study, but we are doing an interdisciplinary research or exchange of views today. So as if we are speak Latin, although we speak different languages. So I have to speak a very clear language or plain language, otherwise other people don't understand what I'm going to say. So I try to do my best to explain what I want to say in a plain language. But also, please don't hesitate to ask me any questions. I've been working on many issues like cybersecurity recently, I convened about 15 people coming from different agencies. And at first, I told all of them that don't be shy, don't be afraid of asking any naive questions. The worst thing is that leaving the room after the meeting, thinking that it was a great meeting, but remembering nothing. That is not good. So that this is interdisciplinary. We want to see things from different angles, and doing a substantial discussions, we will be able to learn each other. And today that I want to discuss is the rule of law. Some people say that rule of law is in danger. Peace through strength is more important than the rule of law. Is it true or not? Is it true? Then if I say, is it true? The answer is no, but things are not so simple. I think that why we are discussing this is rule of law more important than power. There are several factors that makes us ask these questions. First is a pursuit of its own historical agenda by some countries. And this is about Russia, aggression against Ukraine. They call it a military, especially military operations. But it is clear that it is a blatant violation of international law, sending your troops beyond your border without the consent of other countries. And so that the United Nations Security Council discussed this issue, but it is a fact of the matter that since this is about a permanent member of the Security Council's behavior, that the Security Council were not able to take an effective decision or resolution in that forum. So we went to UNGA. UNGA is a United Nations General Assembly. So just after March 2022, maybe you remember the 141 member states voted for a resolution to condemn Russia's aggression. So this is a pursuit of its own defined agenda, historical agenda. And history cannot be used as a kind of a pretext to allow invasion of another country. Some other countries are resorting to historical agenda, but I do not go into the detail right now. Second aspect that makes us ask this question is America. The America First policy, and the United States has been the guardians of the post-war international law, international order. That is true. At the end of the World War II, Second World War, the United States contributed creating an international format or framework right now. And they were very proud of upholding this international order. But they are now diminishing their respect for international law, particularly with the success of detention of President Maduro of Venezuela at the beginning of this year. Maybe President Trump thought that there was a very good success and drew a very strange lesson from that, thinking that we can do Iran, and next maybe Cuba. So Iran, what they are with Iran, as you know, that is a very, very difficult situation. Mr. Trump said once in a New York Times interview that I don't need international law. And this is a very shocking statement reported by the press. And the United States government stopped to use the word rule-based international order. Up until Biden's administration, the rule-based international order is a key word to explain that international society should be based on predictable rules. And there comes America First policy. America First. We are very much confused by this concept. And as a practitioner, through my experience with the United States and lots of transactions with the United States, including the negotiation of tariffs, I think there are the three aspects of America First policy. First is that America's interest comes first. America paid too much contribution to the international world. And America should be more awarded by that contribution. And so that burden shifting is important. Burden shift to other allies particularly. This is the first aspect of the America First policy. Second is America should be number one. You know that in the autumn that we will do Japan series in baseball. we call it Japan series. We are humble. Americans don't say American series. They call it World Series. It means that America likes to be number one. That has not changed with the apparition of Mr. Trump. And third point is that the transactional approach. They want to, and this is rather due to Mr. Trump's character, that President Trump wants to settle issues through transactions rather than international law or predictable mechanism of rules. So this makes the America First policy is composed of these three elements. This is the second element. That's what makes us answer or question why international rule of law is important or not. The third element is a lack of responsibility for global governance. Global governance is important. It has been the case that America has been the major player or guardian of this global order, what we call Pax Americana, before Pax Britannica. Long time ago, it was Pax Romana. But America is now ready to take on burden to uphold international order right now, so that we are lacking a major player in terms of upholding international governance. Climate changes, plastic pollution, pandemics, cyber, AI, these are the areas that we have to work on together because this is about not one country's issue. This is transboundary issues. But Global South countries advocate principle CBDR, common but differentiated responsibility. It means that the development countries have already enjoyed the fruits, so that now is the time that development countries or developed countries should pay more to cover the cost of benefit that Global South countries or developing countries cannot have. This is a principle established particularly in environment field. This is somehow based on historical responsibility from their point of view. And they are putting forward this agenda to many issues like plastic pollutions. Climate change, yes, we can understand that. Developed countries used air and polluted it. That caused damage to developing countries. But is this a case for example, plastic waste? Or is it a case for cyber? Is it a case for pandemic? Try to export this concept of CBDR to other issues would not be healthy for the management of international society. This is at least how we think, but Global South countries have different point of view. America, Pax America is over. We say that we are in a multipolar world, but does it mean something, multipolar worlds? Are each pole, or is each pole or player, major player of each pole ready to take responsibility in their framework? I have strong doubt about that. So this is a third element. Fourth element, that's why we asked rule of law is danger or not, is double standards. Ukrainian and Palestine issues, if you compare, there's a difference of attitudes, particularly in developed countries. Interesting thing is that this double standards argument, criticisms goes to Western countries and do not go to China and Russia, particularly China. They are very good at double standards, but criticism doesn't go there. In a sense, that Global South countries also adopting their own double standards. But at the same time, the Global South countries do not oppose the rule of law. They do care about international law. They do care about autonomy, strategic autonomy. In international law field, there's a school advocating third world approaches to international law, TWAIL. This 12 says that international law has been used for the sake of developed countries, so that developing countries is not in a position to follow. But no coherent alternative was presented by the Global South. So international law continues to be an important element even for Global South. So these are the four elements I want to point out as element that complicates international situation right now. So how should we assess this and deal with this situation right now? Let me share with you my personal thinking. So first, about historical agenda. I don't think that history or states should be allowed to impose historical views on other countries unilaterally. International law does not establish a historical truth. That's not the rule of the international law. International law just throws legal consequences of historical events. And so that if we try to unfroze this situation frozen by international law, that will be a jungle by power. There are lots of borders. Existing international borders are settled by agreements. If the border is not unsettled, then diplomatic solutions, diplomatic negotiations, or international adjudication, so by international court, should decide this settlement. But historical claims, each country has its own historical claims, including Japan, that cannot have a legal justification for the use of war. That is clear. But that point, basic thing has collapsed because of the invasion of Russia's invasion toward Ukraine. United States, Russia, France, UK, China have veto powers in the Security Council. This makes this situation very complicated. Policy recommendation for these history issues is that there's one United States Nations General Assembly's resolution that was adopted 2022 that requires a permanent member country who cast a veto in the Security Council come to the General Assembly to speak up, explain why did they vote veto to a certain resolution. This is about enhancing accountability and enhancing accountability and presenting risk about reputational cost of them. And this looks kind of a not powerful solution, but this is a very effective solution that we agreed upon. Another point is important is, especially for Japan, is that if something happened in the long distant faraway place, don't say that we urge restraint to all parties concerned. This is just ducking the situation. This is not good. Of course, there are so many issues that we cannot make a judgment on because it's faraway situation and we don't have any direct interest. But try to be explicit about how you feel about what happened, particularly when it comes to a violation of international law or imposition of historical agenda on other parties. This is quite important. Second, about US policy, what should we do? It's important. And most important thing was, the things are easy. If you have closer relationship, good relationship, intimate relationship with Donald Trump, if you can say anything and not offend him, then you'll be in a very good shape. And no foreign leader cannot do this. Shinzo Abe did that almost during the first Trump. But second Trump, no leader, Meloni cannot do that. No one can do that. Rutte, Secretary General Rutte is doing a great job, but still that he cannot do that. So you have to keep in mind that. And is it okay in your interest, in your country's interest? If you're advisor to your leader, or for example, Prime Minister Takaichi or President Macron, then can you really advise your leader that you can confront Trump in an open manner? No, that was done by a Swiss president and asking Trump not to raise taxes because what you are doing is nonsense. Then after that, tax for Swiss products went up and had a huge consequences. And is it really good or not? So, but at the working levels, we have to communicate and make our position clearly known to them For example, when it comes to United States military operations, if you have doubts, if you have any questions, you should never be shy about raising this question at experts level to the United States. Articulate your positions clearly is important because when it comes to a situation far away, then sometimes you cannot make judgment because you don't have any information, but try to be clear about your position and particularly legal position, because accountability leads to credibility of your country, and particularly when it comes to Japan. America first will not disappear beyond 2027. But I said 3 parts of American first policy, but the last part of that, transactional part, may go, hopefully. Stability through law is beneficial to all countries, including the United States. So that somehow, in the meantime, we would like to be patient so that the United States come to, particularly to this aspect of respect for international law. We should nudge toward recognizing respect for international law to Americans, saying that it will serve American interests. This is about second point of United States. Third point, responsible governance and criticism of double standards. International law is also referred to by Russia, United States, when it comes to aggression of Ukraine by Russia. Russia made a report, notification to the Security Council. Why did they do that, including justification in Article 51 of the United Nations. United States also presented its excuse of justification and notified to the United Security Council, referring to Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. So that normative force or value of international law has not disappeared. Even country who tries to do something dubious about international law still wants to justify its position using international law. Global South is not monolithic, and they express dissatisfaction with the way international law has been developed, but they do not present so far any alternative on international law or international legal order. So rule of law or international law is still upheld and supported in many countries. It's not a binary choice. Rule of law has been lost or is lost its values, or rule of law is sacred. No, the truth is somewhere between the two, and we have to continue to go to this part. I mean, that the upholding the rule of law is important. Policy recommendations. So rule of law, first of all, another important thing I forgot to say. Rule of law has its inherent limitations. Rule of law in international society, there's no automatic powerful judicial branch who is able to and capable of rendering decisions to any countries. This is in the context of agreed nations that international adjudication works. And second point is that there is a P5 prerogative in the United Nations. So any wrongdoing by a member of P5 countries cannot be adjudicated or decided on in Security Council. But this is how the world has been since the end of World War II. So, but within that restraint, rule of law has been and should be upheld. Global South, CBDR, as I said, common but differentiated responsibility is not sustainable. If you go to climate change negotiations, these things have become so emotional, and developed countries is no longer able to be generous enough to afford money that is claimed by the Global South countries. So this is a very severe situation right now. No country is raising hands that I'm going to take responsibility for global governance. Japan should be in a very good position to do this. How to strengthen the rule of law? I just want to mention several things, very technical thing. First is to expand the scope of countries who accept the jurisdiction of ICJ, because there's only 75 countries who accepted the automatic compulsory jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice. Expanding that means that there are more countries who are ready to abide by the ruling of International Court of Justice. But there's another thing. So if there's one country, A, who is not has not accepted the jurisdiction of ICJ, country B, who accepts this jurisdiction of ICJ, if country A make aggression against B, this country A has more legal responsibility, because this country could have solved the issue by negotiation if this country A accepted the ICJ jurisdiction. Then the issue will be sent to ICJ and will be settled in a peaceful manner. But they disregard this process and resort to war. So their responsibility for resorting to use of force will be heavier. So this is the first point. Second point of clarification of national security exemption clause in WTO or in many treaties. National security clause has been there for a long time, that not so much debate in international rulings. Third is dialogue is important. No preaching. Treat everybody with mutual respect is particularly more important. Diplomacy should play a bigger role because tensions among countries are especially high. So my question was that is rule of law in danger, or if peace through strength is more important than rule of law? I think rule-based or international order has not ended, should not end. How we can restore this is a more important subject. And in a sense that Japan is very well positioned to play a significant role in this front. So this is what I want to say today, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the very insightful the lecture. Before opening the floor, I have two big questions. First, Okano-san, in addressing the action of great powers, you suggest two main approaches: nudging the US at the administrative level to comply with international law, and using the UN General Assembly to raise reputational costs against P5 violators whose actions are blocked by vetoes. My question is that about harsh reality of these soft measures. Realistically, can administrative level negotiation restrain transactional American first US leadership? And simultaneously, do reputational costs genuinely deter great powers that prioritize their own historical narratives over international condemnation? If these approaches fail, what is our practical plan B to manage great power policies? Please.
Thank you. So these are the methods that I proposed, and are these enough or not? They are not enough. And this is how the international society is right now. There's no automatic compulsory power, superpower, that can order a wrongdoing country to stop doing something. Then there's another, then what we can do is to bring those countries in a position to explain why they are doing this. If these countries are not interested in explaining what they are doing and just think that they can do whatever they do, then there's no effect. My proposal does not have any effect on those countries. But still, even Russia and even Mr. Trump, who resort to that kind of form of use of force, tries to use international law to justify its position. I think there's a hint. I think that try to if we can create a more norm or kind of an environment where you are expected to explain more clearly what you do, referring to existing international law or international framework, I think that that will cost a lot of energy or burden on those countries who resort to that action, because before resorting to that action, they have to justify this, justify their actions by international law. And so that may have a kind of a chilling or deterrence effect to those actions. So imposing a cost of explaining what they're doing using international law is still an effective tool that we have to do. And also that applies to a reputational cost. Still China, Russia, United States, or even Israel cares about how they are seen by other countries. Well, these other countries' views are just views and don't have any automatic compulsory power in international field. But the leaders and public servants supporting the leaders do care about how their actions will be viewed by other countries, particularly still a traditional media like a New York Times or the Financial Times. And so these kinds of a reputational costs factor is quite high.
Thank you. Second, concerning Japan's law, you suggest Japan can build trust by addressing double standard criticism through accountability. And you urge to focus on restoring the rule-based order rather than yielding to the rule of power. My question, however, looking at the current Japan administration, we are rapidly bolstering its defense capability and actively building economic security blocks. Some might argue Japan is applying its own double standards, reacting less critically to allies than to Russia, and simply adapting to the rule of power. If the Japanese government itself is increasing force to lean toward power politics, where does the red line lie? And how can civil society and academia actively intervene to keep Japan anchored to the rule of law?
One aspect of double standard is that Japan is also can be criticized being applying double standards to what's happening in the world, like Ukraine resolution, we supported Ukraine. In Palestine resolutions, we abstained from that. And but as I told you that all countries are kind of applying double standards right now, even global South countries who criticize mostly Western countries for double standards, also applying their double standards. But the problem right now is that no country is able to taking a coherent position. We should go back to a coherent position and able to apply a single standard when it comes to international law. Japan should go as much as possible in that direction with the constraint of national security constraint. It is a fact of the matter that the United States is extending nuclear deterrence to Japan, and Japan is benefiting from that. And without that, then what would we be? If we come to a conclusion that we don't need the extended deterrence of the United States, then we can say anything about what the United States does in terms of international law. But that is not the case. Then there's some practical decision that we have to make sometimes. About the vacuum of power in this region, I think that the Japanese government, Japanese public opinions, most of the Japanese public opinion wants to continue to make our autonomy independent policy of national security without the interference of other countries. And in order to do that, we want to first position is that alternative is that we want to take a kind of isolated Japan first position, including investing heavily in our Japan's self-defense forces capability and depending less on United States. And would it be enough? Would it be possible or not? And would it be the preference of the Japanese people? I doubt that. The second option is continue to rely on the alliance with the United States, although the burden sharing will be different, but still that with using this alliance and with defense, building our defense capability, we will be able to fend off any possible incursion or invasion or unilateral change of status quo attempt by other countries. This may be, I think that the majority of Japanese people would like to see. This is why that Japanese government is taking the step, taking that national security stance in that direction. Maybe third option is that try to accommodate Chinese influence in this part of the region and be vulnerable to attacks coming from North Korea. That would be a third option. I don't think that the majority of Japanese will go in that way. The difference of security environment or difficulty of the Japanese national security environment is that we are surrounded by two big nuclear powers, South China and Russia. And North Korea is developing its nuclear powers, and that regime is very, very unpredictable. How should deal with these powers, securing Japanese safeness of the people? That is a huge, huge issue. And in order to do that, most important thing or a single important thing is that make sure that the vacuum will not be seen around Japan's security side. Thank you.
Our time is limited, so I ask how many people want to have a question? One, okay, please first. Please brief the short.
I'm from the Institute of Developing Economies. My name is Hussam Darwiche. I enjoyed your talk very much, but I am a realist in practice and the way I think about the world. And what I heard from you today is how the world should be, but not how the world is now. And as you know, we live in a world where it is anarchic. Anarchic, it doesn't mean that it is chaotic, but it means, as you mentioned earlier, there is no really world government that could enforce the rule of law, right? So the rule of law is not meaningless. It is important, but its influence is limited, especially when it comes to great power politics. And that's what we are seeing now between Iran, the United States, Ukraine, Russia, and what we maybe in the future, the more wars will have. So international law cannot reliably constrain states when their security interests are involved, right? And that's what we are seeing. They would maybe pay attention to the rule of law when it works for their interests, but they would avoid the rule of law when it is not working for their interests. So great powers obey it only when it aligns somehow with their interests, not because it is important for them. And also rule of law may facilitate law politics. When we talk about law politics, issues such, for example, trade, so international law is really important, right? But it is much weaker when it comes to higher politics. And we are talking about here territorial disputes, for example, or national survival. So what would you say to those people who see the world as it is now? And how would international law really work in a realist world? Thank you.
Thank you. This is a classic question. When mission of Iwakura at the beginning of Meiji to learn about European countries was dispatched to Europe. And when they met with Bismarck, they said our Japanese ancestors said that the international law will become important from this on. And Bismarck said that the international law is a tool for small countries because big countries don't care about international law. And the Japanese mission were so much surprised. And I don't know what they learned from that, what Bismarck said. But the same thing applies still today. The structure of international politics is such that there's no superpower judicial system, so that sovereignty is equal. you cannot bound by something that you have agreed to abide by, right? And also that the P5, these 5 countries have a prerogative in international system. They have a veto power in Security Council. That means that if they have an issue that comes up to Security Council, and that issue is related to national security issues in that country, and may go against that country, then that country will certainly cast a veto, and there's no normative decision that would be made in the Security Council. So there's a limit about what we can expect from current international law and current international political system. Then can we just say that we be happy about, be content to say that this is about big power politics, that international law, we don't expect it to play a big role in the decision-making or in policy decision of these big powers? I don't think so. Still, you are right to say that international law, rule of law, it maybe seems diminishing its power, but by enhancing the transparency and enhancing the applicability of this law, or in a broader sense, I think that put those countries who try to change or disregard international law to seriously consider before they take actions. So still, I believe that it's not binary choice, but still that there's a room, and particularly that the transparency, accountability part, making an environment conducive to make everybody think that we should be legally clear before taking possibly problematic actions.
Hi, thank you so much for your speech. I think it was very inspiring. I have a question about middle powers. And I think, of course, in the past 2 years, that's becoming increasingly a narrative that has become powerful, that middle powers that are interested in the rule of law need to band together. And there's the discussion also, in the EU, we hear about relations with Japan, relations with South Korea, relations with India even, and sort of the discussion around the indivisibility of security in the Euro-Atlantic and Indo-Pacific from these middle powers. But I've also observed that a lot of that cooperation is not very institutionalized. And when it comes down to the practicalities, you talk to the Europeans, you talk to the Japanese, and it's very hard for them to actually consider how practical cooperation can take place. And then that leads also to a slight concern that I have also, that middle powers have historically also been extremely transactional and extremely, sort of historical in their narratives. And that's one of the reasons why the US was so effective as a global guarantor, because of this hegemonic peace theory and this idea that they were the ones that were managing middle powers and constraining them. So my question is, how do you feel that middle powers can collectively organize and practically and institutionally cooperate rather than just behave in ad hoc and also transactional matters? And then sort of a semi-related question with Mark Carney's speech around middle powers. One of the next steps that he took was actually to sign a trade deal with China. So, I mean, it's a question of also how middle powers are viewing other poles in the system, including the Chinese one, and whether or not that's more of a threat or more of an opportunity.
Okay, several points. One is that we should not take a hasty decision about what should we do about force structure. We are in a very fluid situation, saying that midterm elections is just around the corner. In 2 years' time, that there will be another change of government in the United States. So that it is too naive to think that we will come back to the status quo ante before the coming of power of Mr. Trump. But still, that if we decide what kind of world we are facing and take decisions along that line, I think that we will once again have a regret that we took a hasty decision. So we have to be very flexible at this time, particularly for next 1 or 2 years. Second point is that so mid-power powers discussion is quite rampant now. And President Stubb of Finland, he is one of the philosophical politicians right now and very impressive guy. Wrote a piece in Foreign Affairs saying that global West should talk with global South because global South may go to global East. Interesting argument. And in a sense, in the nutshell, Mr. Stubb thinks that the Europeans should cooperate more closely with global South countries. And that is true, an important argument. But by saying so, categorizing countries like global South, global North, global East makes global South people quite unhappy. Because what is global North? I mean, Mongolia global North or global South? It's a technical, tactical question, but global South is not a monolithic entity. And by presenting things as global North versus global South, global East versus global South, it insinuates that the global South and global North, how global North should treat with global South, means that the global North see global South as one subject, not a mutual partner or equal partner. And global South countries, particularly our ASEAN countries, if you discuss with them, then Mr. Okano, you know that Western countries imposes values. That was an argument 20 years ago. So we don't like it. Okay, I understand that. 10 years ago, I was told by us Singaporean colleagues that, Mr. Okano, you are always talking about United Nations Charter. That's okay. But the principles, that's okay. Principles are important. But I don't want to be told by you that these are the principles. So the way of presenting things is very important. So I said that over the next 2 years, it's too premature to decide what kind of international world order should we have. Rather than that, we should enhance a practical cooperation like energy cooperation or cybersecurity cooperation, because cyber crimes are everybody's crime or everybody's enemy. There's a huge incentive, for example, Cambodia, Indonesia, or even Myanmar to accept our cooperation in cybersecurity. By doing that kind of promoting that kind of practical cooperation, that Japan would be able to play a bigger role in terms of connecting more closely with those what we call global South countries, so that we can secure a kind of a de facto collaboration among mid-level countries. So this is how I think. Just saying that the global, mid-power or mid-level countries, a coalition won't get us anywhere. Now is the time for advancing a practical cooperation. This is how I think.
Any other question? Please. So our time is limited, so just 1, 2, 3.
Thank you very much for this really interesting conversation. I have a quick question. So one is, when we're talking about this kind of the rule of the law, somehow we have assumed the law is all established. So I wonder about would like to comment about is something we can do to change the law, or the law is not something just natural there. So that should be a sphere for negotiation. So the one question. The other questions, the rule of law has also, I think, in some way assumed every society and country in this world is all recognized by the international law. But actually not. There are countries or society now, if not all, but not recognized by international law. So I would like to hear your comment about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So as I told you that the current international law is a product to freeze the status quo of order that was created by a big historical event, particularly, for example, World War II. And what I wanted to say is that whether you like it or not, just undermine or reverse that order by using a use of force is violation of international law. But is it okay just to say that the law will continue to be the same, which is a reflection of a status quo of a certain period of time of our history? No, that is not the case. So that's why we are, for example, struggling in the field of climate change. There's no ruling. So in the earlier panel that was there any international law that prohibits the construction of a nuclear power plant inside near the border area. And that law is now accumulating a little bit, but not to the extent possible to the extent fully, to such extent to make it concrete in international treaty forum. But still, so new areas, we have to create new laws. So in that context, that the new voices should be incorporated in global South countries. And plastic waste convention we are creating right now, but there's an emotional debate going on. There's a huge gap between developed countries and developing countries. But still that in order to create a new law, or sometimes update older version of new law, we have to make sure that those countries, particularly global South countries' view will be reflected. But saying is easy, but doing is really difficult. This is a point that I just want to make. Second point is, so you know that, for example, Vienna Convention of the Law of the Treaties, this is just an example. Vienna Convention of the Diplomatic Relations, these are the fundamental rules, kind of constitution in diplomatic society. It was established like a 1960s, when African voices were not there. That's the fact of the matter. And many Africans think that this is not an agreement that our views are considered in. And do we really have to accept this? And there's a philosophical debate about that. But practically meaning saying that it's in their interest to follow this established law. So there's always a competition of those people who join a new forum and those people who are inside the forum. It happens, for example, in European Union, like acquis. Acquis is an established framework. If you want to join European Union, you have to follow this and accept all these existing legal instruments. And why do we have to then follow this? Then if you don't want to follow that, you don't need to enter us. But when it comes to international law in general, it cannot be like that. So how to strike a balance? Continue preserving the current international law and also creating a new law to accommodate the need coming from global, emerging global new issues.
Two persons from the 1, 2, yeah, this is the final question. So we take same time, both.
Okay, I'd like to one specific question about China. China's very aggressive attitude in South China Sea. China exercises its own maritime law, then has occupied many small islands in South China Sea, neglecting claims by neighboring ASEAN countries, neglecting international law, international maritime law. So far, no country can stop China, it seems. Some of ASEAN members, like Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, now support China to get financial support from China. So what should we be done to make China comply with international law or international maritime law? Shall we wait when China's economy is shrinking? Well, recently, China is very, very aggressive to the Philippines. I think considering Philippines very critical geographical position to the Strait of Taiwan. So I'm wondering,
Some final question.
Thank you very much. Since you mentioned the international organization, I would like to ask you about perpetual question. Should we be very hopeful about reforms of UN and some other international organizations, or it's better to create something new, which I know it's also very difficult, and we kind of, like we saw this last decade. So what would be your advice on this topic?
Thank you. First question, how can we do vis-a-vis Chinese aggressive actions? So very difficult question. So no magic solutions. As I said, that there's no military to stop that kind of wrongdoing things in international community. So in international law, just adjudicate or give a judgment to those countries who accept that jurisdiction. Actually, China accepted the United Nations Law of the Treaty Tribunal jurisdiction. This is a UN tribunal, UNCLOS, United Nations Convention of the Rule of the Law tribunal. And China says that its paper is rubbish. And so they are clearly violating international law. In order to address this issue, what can we do? There's no kind of a powerful organization with a concrete power to address this situation. So what should we do? First is that put a reputational cost on those countries who do wrongdoing. And in order to do that, make sure that what's happening on the ground will be illuminated, that make cast light on what's happening on the ground is particularly important, because when it comes to sea, that it has been the case that no one knows what's happening on the sea, because sea is vast. But now that with the image of satellites and other means, that what's happening on the scene is clearly reported immediately right now. And so that every country who has direct interest can raise voices. So that first, fact finding is important. Second is that the reputational cost, or ask accountability for the action they are taking by as many countries as possible, looks like most realistic way of a solution. If its solution is sufficient or not, this is another question. About United Nations, how to deal with that. So United Nations Security Council is not doing its public functions. But I don't believe that the P5 countries is ready to relinquish any type of prerogative that was bestowed on them as a gift or the product of the World War II. And so that it is this situation, I think, that will continue, but without kind of any legitimacy that will be only given to the Security Council by proper reform, then that any product, the function of the Security Council will continue to be discounted in the international community. Then can we say that the United Nations has no role to play? I don't think so. United Nations has still a big role to play, because when it comes to UN, and if you convene a meeting in UN, many countries, I think all countries will go to that meeting thinking that it is important because it is a UN blah, blah, blah meeting. And also that if you want to create something normative things, legal things, whatever, at the international level, the easiest way is go to a United Nations and raise issues in the United Nations meeting, once first committee, second committee, until sixth committee, whatever the committee that has a competence in. And you can ask for convening the meeting then you can have a debate with 193 countries, including observers and NGOs. So the convening power is very, very important. Also, United Nations General Assembly, which doesn't have a binding power in terms of their resolution, but still have a normative power. It means that they create international common consensus still. And that is quite lacking in other areas, so that there's still a use of United Nations.
Thank you so much, Okano-san. I really wish you keep your diplomatic contribution to Japan and more based on rule-based country.
But I hope my language was clear to you. Because lawyers tend to speak Latin, and at the end of the meeting, everybody thinks that I didn't understand what the guy said. And so.
No, I should always understand your helpful, law-loving approach. This is a very must for our against jungle world order. So thank you so much for
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.